And I was taking a professional class, and it's not uncommon for people to sit around, come and visit the classes. You figure they're friends or relatives of people who are taking the class. And a young man walked up to me afterwards by the name of John Lehman. He was the choreographer here for the Lost Colony. And he said, would you be interested in being in a show in North Carolina? And I said, well, tell me more. And he and his wife had gone up there to do some training that winter, and so they had rented an apartment. So he said, why don't you come over for dinner one evening, meet my wife, and I will tell you all about the Outer Banks. And he didn't even tell me that much about the show to begin with, but he started by talking about the people. And then he told me more about the show and the history, and well, I decided I did want to come. And I'll tell you, I was in love with the Outer Banks and the people before I ever got here. It was mind-boggling, because he did not exaggerate. He described the area to a T. And we came down Memorial Day weekend. The show didn't open until later in June, much later than it does now. And we arrived Memorial Day weekend at about 8 in the morning on Saturday. We had driven all night. We reached the top of the beach, and there was nothing. I mean, there were a few motels, a few cottages, and then the old aristocracy cottages. But I mean, we could turn the corner there up at the north end of the beach, and we decided, I had 5 other dancers with me, and we decided we'd been scammed, because we were told that we were going to play to an audience of about 1,800 to 2,000 every night. And we rode all the way down the beach, never passed a car, and most of the and there was only the beach road. There was no such thing as a bypass. And most of the cottages were all closed up, the ones that were there. There really were not a lot of things to be seen. And we pulled into Matteo, and there wasn't even a car on a street in Matteo. There were very few cars to be seen any place, and that was 1953. And this main street roads, 4 or 5 roads, had been paved, and we pulled into Aunt Mary and Uncle Bob O'Neill's wigwam, and that's what they called it. It was a tourist home, and they let us stay there until the offices of the colony opened up, and we shed our shoes because we were told everybody went barefoot, and in those days they really did. I mean. And the only place that was air-conditioned on the island that I recall was Fearing's Restaurant. And we walked in there, and Ada was sitting there, Ava Cutrell and Sybil, and we walked in. And, of course, everybody who lived there, the population was so much smaller. I think the whole county would only have been about 4,000. And we walked into the Fearing's Restaurant, and they greeted us, and they had us figured out. Peg, you come for the pageant? Everybody called it the pageant in those days. And our feet were freezing, because that was the only place in Dare County, I think, that had air conditioning, and they had it like a refrigerator. But we got used to that, and then we had our first hush puppies. We knew we had arrived in heaven. And I have never regretted ever coming here since. It's just, and I must say, talk about the people. By the time that first summer was over, the people were exactly as it was described. They were cordial, they were friendly, proud of the show. And it really, I think John Lehman had us brainwashed, because he said, you know, the area has been isolated for a long time. And he said that it's very important that if I'm responsible for anybody coming down to spend time on this island, that they be aware of the fact that they're guests in this community of these people. And he went on to extol their praises. And I took that to heart. And I think because I did, and I sort of knew to keep my place as far as not be a brassy show person or something like that.
How long did that last, Eddie?
What'd you say? This is beginning to sound like the Mutt and Jeff show. Anyway, I have never regretted coming here, and it has opened up worlds of opportunity. And I don't think I was the master of ceremonies today at the luncheon in honor of David, and I wasn't going to say anything, but I turned to him and I said, David, I don't think my life would have been as meaningful to me if I had never met you. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. So we joke a lot, but I have so much respect for him, I can't tell you. And he was an inspiration to me from the first time I met him. So my interest in doing things in the community continues on, and it's all your fault.
So what you're saying, Eddie, is that you adopted that philosophy until you met David?
I didn't have, that's part of my growing. I don't know that I had a philosophy.
Yeah, I understand.
May I ask Eddie a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
When you came to Roanoke Island and to be in this pageant, story goes that I understand Lehman told you that there would be lots of midgets in the show.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, if you want this, thank you. She's prompting me because the story
I've been around these guys before. They're going to upstage me anyway.
but I was sitting on Aunt Grace Davis's porch. Now, Aunt Grace Davis played a Gona. And one other thing she did, in those days, the singers were all from Princeton, from
Westminster
Choir College. And she had usually had about 8 of them that would stay at the house, and then she had a community dining room, and she charged them room and board, and she would fix breakfast and I think lunch. But anyway, we were sitting on the front porch, and some of the singers were just arriving that original weekend, and I heard probably Nina Williams telling somebody else, well, you know, there's over 500 midgets on the island. And it was 2 weeks before I found out that was their name. I couldn't understand where all these little people were. That's a true story. One more comment, I'm going to stop, but they say ignorance is bliss, and I was so happy.